Thanks, Seaenna. I'm talking to the Zoomers. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Arts at Mark's Garage. As you entered into the room, you notice there's an exhibit. It's called Resiliency. That's the title of this month's. It stands for with the SEA, a celebration of science, education, and art. So that's why you're like, that's not how you spell it. It's like, that's how we spell it this month. And we feature 3 artists who you'll hear tonight from Boz Schur. We also have Michelle Schwengel-Regala and Shanae Tam. And all 3 of them paired up with different projects of Hawaii Sea-Grant, including Hanauma Bay Education Program, Waikalua Local IA, where we have our Pua Boot Camp, and you'll hear more about it. And then also it's the year of the Limu. And as you see, we have the book, The Limu Eater. So there's little highlights there and happy to talk about them more. Michelle is here, although she will be featured next week on Monday for our next Science by the Sea. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Kumu Boz Schur, who is an incredible artist of all sorts of mediums. And you see, she'll talk more about this. But she's also an art teacher over at Kamehameha Schools and is a delight to work with. And we had an opportunity to work with her with the mural club that was student driven. So please welcome Boz with me.
I will give you this.
It's a lot, yeah.
Okay.
You can do it. I think you can do it.
Oh, great. No, I'm a teacher. I got this. All right. Aloha. Hi. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. I'm a bit of a novelty because I don't actually have any background in science. So I'm going to make this up as I go along. And luckily for me, I have a lot of great visuals. So hopefully you'll be contentedly distracted. All right. So I was very fortunate to be able to work with Beth Lenz. Previous to this exhibition, as she mentioned, my students at Kamehameha Schools are very self-driven, almost to an annoyingly degree. They pursued murals because I myself am a muralist. And so we kind of partnered with Beth and Sea-Grant and the Kahiaka Hawaii Canoe Club to create this wonderful mural at Sand Island. So if you ever get a chance to see it, any chance that I can brag about my students, I'm happy to do so. But because I'm an educator, I actually worked with Hanauma Bay and their education program, and they were incredible and welcoming and so very educational. And honestly, I don't remember a lot of what they told me, so because it's not my specialty. But one thing that really did stand out to me as I was working on this. Is how do I get started, right? So how do I get from looking at Hanauma Bay education program, how did I get from that big idea to here, which ended up being kind of overwhelming and a little bit colorful, but that's okay because that kind of fits my personality. So if you don't know, the other 2 artists that I was working with is actually very intimidating because Michelle has a background in science illustration and Shanae comes from a family of fishermen and I am none of those things. So I was like, what am I going to do? This is very, I'm an illustrator. I can do this too. I can draw scientifically. And the truth is, no, I cannot do that. So I tried really hard and I did a bunch of research. I looked online and I scanned a bunch of really great textbooks that I was able to check out at Kamehameha Schools. And I went to Hanauma Bay and with my GoPro, I took a bunch of my own images because we want to avoid copyright infringement. And then I went onto the internet and I absolutely copyright infringed a whole bunch of stuff. But then I photoshopped it, so it's okay. And I went back to Hanauma Bay a lot of times. And as you can see, I'm kind of a digital hoarder. So it was very difficult to kind of figure out like, what did I want to do? What did I want to focus on? Because there were so many wonderful things that you're programmed to do. And that's really inspiring to somebody like me as an educator. So what I did is I tried really hard to draw scientifically and it ended up looking really colorful because that's my jam. It's colors and shapes. I like rainbows and I like really loud things. And it just gives me so much joy that the 80s and the 90s are making a comeback. And my students think my playlist is really great. So I started here and then I gave myself a prompt list that I do every October. And I also tried to put in a little olelo in there to be very mindful of place and what I'm trying to do. And I eventually just gave up and things got really colorful and fun and silly. And I think that kind of works for me because it combined this beautiful love of technology and art with the kind of hope that really this what the sense of that was what really the education was surrounding at Hunama Bay, because at first I wanted to focus on things like coral bleaching. And if you look at the little corals out there, they don't look like anything else that I've done, right? They're a little bit small and they're a little bit sad. And I realized that I just couldn't do that. I couldn't focus on things that were negative because there's just too much negativity going on. So I really went another direction, as you can see, and I went really big and colorful. And I decided to focus on the healing that Hunama Bay has recently been doing because of the closure with the pandemic and their limited attendance numbers, and just that kind of joy that you find, like getting back in the water and getting back out in the community. So if you actually look at this big mural, there's a sneaky little picture of me swimming in there. You can find it later. And then that brings us to here, and all of our community comes together. You're all welcome to work on that mural. I highly encourage you to write your mana'o on it and share your special memories of Hunama Bay and everything that you bring to Sea Grant and our wonderful partnerships together. Mahalo.
Thank you, Boz. Beautiful work. You'll see the digital murals located on the back wall, and then there is an interactive one along the wall here. And I should mention this to you, that past the interactive wall is also the lavatories, the restrooms. So you can go all the way back here and follow along this curtain and you'll find the restrooms. So moving on to our very first talk, drum roll, is Tyler, who will be speaking to us about more than a lump. Keep drum rolling. The secret life of the sea cucumber.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Can you all hear me okay? Yes, okay, great. Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Tyler Goodearly. I'm a PhD student at UH Manoa in the Department of Human Nutrition, Food, and Animal Sciences. My advisor is here, back there, Dr. Andre Seal. Everybody say, hi, Andre. Yes. My project is funded by Hawaii Sea Grant, and my project partners are Pacific American Foundation and Kauai Sea Farm. Today, my talk is titled More Than a Lump, The Secret Life of the Sea Cucumber. I'm a sea cucumber physiologist, and there's not many of us out there. And so I wanted to share with you how I became a sea cucumber physiologist, and also what I've learned along the way. So I hope that you leave this talk with a greater appreciation for these amazing creatures. Okay, so we're gonna bring it back to the 90s. My little sister Tara was born in 1999. And as her big brother, I inherited some responsibilities. I was her friend and her confidant and her protector. But in 2001, Tara was diagnosed with a lethal disease called cystic fibrosis. Here she is in the hospital. And so suddenly I was being challenged by my brotherly responsibilities. So what is cystic fibrosis? It's, to talk about cystic fibrosis, we have to talk about the cell. Cells perform these biological roles, and to help facilitate those, we have proteins on the membranes. This one in particular, the CFTR protein, it's a chloride ion channel. So it operates kind of like border patrol. It's checking the passports of these ions, and if they're not chloride ions, they're not getting through. And this is important for our salt and water balance, also called osmoregulation. And we see a lot of CFTR in the lungs, where it helps get rid of mucus in the lungs. So people who have cystic fibrosis have a mutation in this protein. It's either doesn't work properly or it's absent entirely from the cell membrane, meaning that the mucus in the lungs gets trapped, leads to chronic infection and eventually lung necrosis. When Tara was born, or when she was diagnosed rather, the doctors gave her a 50% chance of living to 18. I'm happy to say that she is still alive and thriving today. Yes, let's clap for that. But the guilt remains. There is still no cure for cystic fibrosis. I have um, an innate love for animal physiology. My first study was in the 7th grade, looking at the olfactory system of my aquarium fish. Since then, I've studied feeding kinematics in snipefish. Here are some of the pictures from our publication. I've studied stress in pythons. I've worked on habitat restoration projects, but I've also maintained one foot in the CF world. I lived in Washington, D.C., where I spoke to Congress. I worked in a hospital. I did a lot of volunteer work with fundraisers. I always saw these two worlds as completely separate until 2021, when I stumbled upon some work by Dr. Andre Seal, which showed me that there's actually a bridge between these two worlds. And to prove it, here's a picture from one of Dr. Seal's recent publications, where they use tilapia as models to study salt and water balance or osmoregulation. And one of the things they looked at is the CFTR protein right there in that yellow box, the very protein that's mutated in my little sister. So I knew I had to be a part of this lab. I knew that this is where I belonged, right here in the middle of these two worlds. So I applied last year, and here I am, approximately 1 year later. Instead of tilapia, I'm going to use sea cucumbers as a model for studying their response to salt and water changes in their environment. I also might look at spawning sea cucumbers in captivity and their role in aquaculture. But the reason why sea cucumbers make an interesting model for salt and water balance is because they sit at the bottom of this evolutionary group of animals that humans also belong to. We'll get more into that in a minute, but that's why I'm here. And now for the main attraction of this talk, the sea cucumber. So what is a sea cucumber? I think we all kind of recognize this, right? As a sea cucumber, they're oblong, maybe a little boring. They creep along the bottom of the ocean. Nothing special, right? Wrong. These are all sea cucumbers too. We have sea cucumbers that look like jellyfish and headless chickens. We have sea cucumbers wearing neon. We have big sea cucumbers and small sea cucumbers. So they come in a lot of shapes and sizes and colors. But still, what is a sea cucumber? Well, most importantly, it's an animal, not a plant. They evolved 450 million years ago, 300 million years before flowering plants. So 300 million years before the cucumber. They are in the superphylum Deuterostomia, which I mentioned earlier. Humans are a part of that too. But they're in this phylum, Echinodermata, which they share with sea urchins, sea stars, sand dollars, things like that. And these terms, superphylum and phylum, those are just words we use in phylogeny, which is how we group organisms together by how closely related they are. So next time you see a sea cucumber, remember, that's where you came from. There are 1,700 species globally, and we see them mostly on reefs, but they also occur in the deep sea and in the Arctic, and they're really important to us. So let's dive in. Ecologically, what do sea cucumbers do? We call them the vacuum cleaners or the earthworms of the sea. They do the dirty job that nobody else wants to do. They eat sand, they remove feces and bacteria and detritus from that sand, and then they excrete clean sand along with some ammonia, which can be absorbed by surrounding corals and plants. That process is called bioturbation, that churning of the sand, which is an essential role that sea cucumbers play to keep reefs healthy. And these are workhorses. On the Great Barrier Reef, scientists estimate that sea cucumbers eat 64,000 metric tons of poop annually, which is equivalent to 5 Eiffel Towers. Sea cucumbers also host many parasites, the most famous being the pearlfish, pictured here, poking out of the anus of a sea cucumber. Culturally, sea cucumbers are also important. We see them in SpongeBob and in Pokemon. We also see books named after sea cucumbers and poems that are inspired by sea cucumbers. There's even the legend of Shu Fu, who was an explorer in ancient China, sent by the first emperor to find the elixir of life. 90 years later, he returned with black hair, no wrinkles. feasting only on sea cucumbers during his expedition. So it's no wonder that we see that sea cucumbers have been used in traditional Chinese medicine for millennia. They were used to treat things like impotence, to regulate menstruation, and for heart and lung functions. And recently in academia, we've seen an increase in the number of publications that feature sea cucumbers. Most of these focus on the medicinal properties of extracts, of compounds extracted from sea cucumbers. These are things like anti-obesity effects, reversing fatty liver disease, aiding in wound healing, and even killing cancer. It's like, what can't these guys do, right? Sea cucumbers are also consumed globally as a food source. They're nutritionally super dense, which is where all those medicinal compounds come from. They have more protein weight for weight than beef. And they're part of this luxury food market. They can fetch a hefty price. Look at this. 1 kilogram of dried sea cucumbers can be more than 3,000 US dollars. Combined, there's a global sea cucumber market estimated to be 5 billion US dollars annually, which is 5 times the market value of Zoom, how I'm communicating to all of you. So it's pretty impressive. But with that comes a catch. We've seen an increase in the sea cucumber commercial fisheries, and these sea cucumber populations are hit hard, sometimes so hard that reefs are completely depleted of sea cucumbers. And even after years of a fishing ban, sea cucumbers don't recover. Fortunately, we have aquaculture. We have seen an increase in the aquaculture production of sea cucumbers in China. And we've also seen this aquaculture start to supplement the demand of the luxury food market. Those aquaculturally produced sea cucumbers can also replenish depleted stocks. And here in Hawaii, we have our first sea cucumber hatchery. And this is really cool for me because this is where I will be getting the sea cucumbers that I study from. And here is the first ever sea cucumber produced by Kauai Sea Farm. Today is a full moon, and some of the sea cucumbers that they work with spawn during the full moon. So hopefully we'll get some new babies soon. So that's my talk. Next time you see a sea cucumber, remember it's more than a lump, that they are my model for studying ion regulation, that they may have undiscovered medicinal properties, they're culturally important, and they're really just so cool. So thank you to my lab for being here and supporting me and listening to me talk about sea cucumbers nonstop. Thank you to my friends and family who are here and on Zoom, and to my funder, Hawaii Sea Grant, my project partners, and for the artist for helping us bridge a gap between science and art.
Okay, a question for Tyler. Questions about sea cucumbers. What's? We have a question. Oh, we have a question. Let's hear your question. Yes, please. Can you eat cucumbers that you find on here? And we'll repeat the question.
Yes.
Tyler, can you repeat the question for the online audience?
Yeah, the question is, can you eat sea cucumbers found here in Hawaii? And the answer is yes. And actually, sea cucumbers were consumed regularly until just a few generations ago. We do have some species that are listed as vulnerable or endangered. So if you're going to go consume sea cucumbers, please know the species and the source that you're getting it from.
Another round of applause for Tyler. Thank you so much.
We're going to bring Kapono up to the stage. You have to switch some lavalier mics here. And keep the questions coming. We like questions for our graduate students. So big welcome to Kapono.
Aloha, everybody. My name is Kapono Gaughen. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about social media influencers in their natural environments. Ooh. So social media influencers, coming into this room, you probably have some connotations about whether that's good or bad. as we all do. Hopefully today, I'm gonna bring some of you over to the good side, more specifically, that they can be good for the environment. So I gotta get through some definitions so we're all on the same page going here. What is an influencer exactly? It's a type of online content creator. Content creator is simply a user that uses social media to create and publish content. Content being the substance of what we think of as a post. It could be text, photos, video. If you're posting something on Facebook and one person sees that, you're technically a content creator. What is an influencer? Well, an influencer is a category of content creators. Specifically, they are content creators who have built relationships with their audience to the extent that they are assumed to have an influence over the people that regularly engage with their content. Essentially, you have content, you build a community, you interact with them over time, you have a level of influence, you are an influencer. What does that have to do with the environment? Well, environmental management, we're addressing issues that are largely caused by humans. This often takes the form of creating and enforcing societal rules. And the people that are affected by these rules are what we call stakeholders. A stakeholder being any person or group that can or will be affected by an organization's decisions or strategies. The process of stakeholder engagement is what we do to reach out to these stakeholders and understand them essentially, which is important and often kind of overlooked. Stakeholders understand perspectives that are critical to success in environmental management. They understand the impacts that will be held on the regulatory community. They hold specific knowledges on practice and locations that are often not held by the people creating rules. They can embrace or actively work against your management solutions. Essentially, they have knowledge, perspective, and support networks that can make or break an environmental management solution. How do you find them and engage them? Well, traditionally, we have kind of three broad categories. You can use the activity approach. You can go to a club meetings, you can go to stores, you can go to a networking event. A location approach, if I'm regulating some mountain landscape, I can stand at a trail and hope that a hiker comes by and I can engage with them. I can go to a beach, a user area, or the classic shotgun approach. I can put it out in news media, blast it out, and hope that a couple of those blasts hit the people that I actually want to talk to and that they care enough to come back and engage with me. Essentially, you're relying on a ton of time and effort or hope. But what if there's a way we can take all this, take out the good parts, get rid of the bad, and streamline it to reach people that we care about in a specific spot and engage them, which is where influencer marketing comes in. Something created by the private sector last year was worth $15 billion market or so. Essentially, when a company wants to sell a product, they will find influencers working in that space, sponsor a post, which will then lead customers back to the company. The company will offer compensation for the inclusion of their marketing material within a post, and it's sent to a targeted audience. So breakdown of that, if I am, say, interested in selling video game equipment, my subject is video games or gaming. I would look for influencers making content about gaming on a regular basis, assuming that the people that watch their content are also interested in gaming and are potentially my customers. Or what my project is trying to do, find the stakeholders based on the content and content creators and reach them through the same model. So an example, this is a YouTube channel I have called Shaka Fishing. My subject is fishing in Hawaii. I worked as an influencer in the past selling gear. Basically, people want to sell gear relating to fishing in Hawaii. I'll include a sponsored segment in my post, reaching the community. And now I'm trying to do the inverse of that, which is more targeting a stakeholder group, or in this case, we're looking at regulations, perhaps changing fisheries in Hawaii. You want to talk to fishermen to understand if this is going to work or not. So you could go to a club or a tournament, stand around, hope to talk to them. You could go to a beach, go to a boat ramp, hope they can spare 5 minutes while they're trying to launch their boat. You could do the shotgun approach and just put it on news or put it on some centralized website, hope people care about it. Or we can find an influencer that's working in the space of fishing in Hawaii. The assumption is that people that care about fishing in Hawaii watch their content regularly, and you can reach stakeholders. This just comes with a couple baked in awesome things that you're not going to get with any of those other approaches. First off, influencers' sole purpose is to communicate with their audience. That's what they do, the professional communicators, whether they know it or not. Likely, they're probably a stakeholder themselves. They're going to be able to communicate with other stakeholders in a way that typical management that doesn't do something might not be able to. If you've never fished in Hawaii and you're trying to create rules about fishing Hawaii and you're trying to talk to fishermen in Hawaii, it's probably going to be hard to engage with them on a level that feels genuine. So we did a test run of this last year. I wanted to see, well, is this actually true, or is my idea just totally dumb? I created some posts to Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube asking fishermen to provide input on potential licensing issues. Should there be a license in Hawaii? These kind of questions. The post, the survey itself had 26 questions. A total of 389 people filled that out. 386 of them being people that identified as, yes, I fish in Hawaii. In other words, one content creator managed to hit about 400 stakeholders. Enter the current project, Division of Aquatic Resources, Holomua Marine 30 by 30 initiative. What they're doing is try to essentially, they've been told to create some regulations that manage 30% of Hawaii's fisheries by the year 2030. Part of their critical central pillars are their engaging stakeholders and their planning and implementation so that their solutions they make hopefully aren't just a wash and actually aren't doing anything at all, or in fact do something negative. Their primary stakeholder therefore being Hawaii's fishing community. The current method of reaching them, word of mouth, traditional media, public notices. I don't know about you, but I've probably seen 0 public notices that got me to go to a meeting unless I really, really care about it. I'm not ever digging through the public notices to check. So basically it's limited success, right? The problem is that they're having a difficult reaching specifically people who fish in Hawaii. People show up to the meetings, but it's not exactly the ones they need to speak to. The solution I have, this influencer marketing profile kind of tweak of that methodology. Essentially, DAR, work with somebody that understands this landscape, myself. We will sponsor social media influencers that are making content about fishing in Hawaii, hopefully reaching people who fish in Hawaii to send them back to DAR and get the input they need to make decisions that succeed. Resources funded to this, $6,250. They have 3 physical engagement events where they want people to actually show up and engage with them. They have 2 surveys about things that are up way in the future and they aren't sure what to do about. 5 social media influencers are sponsored per post or per event, average cost of $250 per sponsorship. If you worked in this space before, you would be amazed how much of a deal we're getting from the influencers on this. Here's the list of some of the people that I've agreed to work with and we started working with. If I was selling a product, 150,000 subscriber count, I mean, you're dropping like 8-9 grand a post probably. So the fact that they're willing to do this for basically pennies on the dollar means that they care as much as everybody else cares. It's resonating with them. This is impacting them. They want to make sure it's done right. First round is complete, glad to say. Last week, they had a Maui meeting series on Maui. They tried to have people show up to 3 days. You can come to either day, specifically fishermen on Maui. A typical turnout for that, I've been told by them from their historic records, is maybe like 30 to 50 people. That's pretty good. 200 people showed up. So it seems to be working fairly well, at least from this preliminary data. So to sum things up, there's a new way to understand the human aspect of environmental management. Managers can find those interested in a particular activity in a particular area like we have never been able to do before. Stakeholders can be communicated to by someone they already know and by a person that's also a stakeholder. All done in a platform that is there for the sole purpose of communication and engagement. It really just, everything's built in with this model. It's just a matter of tweaking it for use that it hasn't been done for before. Influencers are in essence being elected by the stakeholder community to be the messengers for them. So hopefully about a couple overview to the, maybe this is good and maybe this is good for the environment. Paula.
Thanks, Kapono. Questions from the audience in the room, and are there questions from the audience online? Val is checking the chat.
Seaenna, you have a question?
To work with voice, let's get it.
Can you repeat the question?
Not yet, but I'm looking for more people. So if you got contact,
My boyfriend.
have him plug me in somehow, put comments, spam.
The question was, have you worked with
Specific influencer.
Yes.
a specific influencer
Rice, let's get it, I think. Is that his name, Mark?
Rice, get it.
called Rice Getting?
Looking for more people to work with it all time, so. The knowledge.
Any questions from online? Let's take one more question. Can you repeat the question, Kapono?
So the question is, what kind of environmental management decisions are we trying to get input on? So for this specific project, it's really an entire revitalizations of the fishery regulation rule package, which in that case, if you don't talk to fishermen, you're going to be making a lot of missteps and decisions. Maybe you're going to put a regulation into place where, oh, actually that fish doesn't even exist there. Or like, oh, we're going to regulate, make sure the reef is really cherry here. Well, there's actually just sand. Like having a worker, the amount of staff that are expected to regulate somewhere the size of Hawaii, it's impossible for them to be everywhere at once and actually know exactly what's going on, or use all the fishing stuff, or use the new stuff. Really, if you are going to have the people that do an activity in your camp helping you design things holistically for any regulatory decision, whether it's environmental management or otherwise, you're going to hit missteps. So in my mind, this is applicable to anything you can really put your mind to. If you want to talk to somebody and get some input, here is an easy way to do it.
Another round of applause for Kapono. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to bring Seaenna up. A big round of applause for Seaenna.
That works.
Aloha mai kako. Thank you all for being here today. My name is Seaenna Correa-Garcia, and we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to shift gears a little bit. So today I'm going to read you guys a story. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Limu Gal. Adventures of Limu and her superpowers. When Limu Gal was just a little girl, she would admire superheroes like Ko'a, I'a, and Mono, wondering if she would ever be as popular as them. Then one day, the amazing Law was flying, and all of a sudden, he saw his friend Limu Gal. He shouted to her, "Quick, we need your help. We've got to save Malulani." Together, they went off to save Malulani, but something was in their way. It was Vailepo. "I will fight you for Malulani," he said. He used his toxic gas, which blinded everyone. Luckily, the amazing Law packed his super rays to shine away the Vailepo while Limu Gal spun in circles, which started to clear the air. Look at her go. But it wasn't enough. Miss Vai Vai saw what was happening and sprinkled her wand, which dissolved away the remaining gas. The three, Limu Gal, Amazing Law, and Miss Vai Vai, cleared the air away, which saved Malulani. The end. So you're probably wondering, what in the world is this girl talking about? I thought we're talking about science tonight. This is actually a spinoff of my research that I am proposing to have as my thesis as a master's student at UH Manoa and the Marine Bio Graduate Program. The dramatic fade. Here we go. Okay. So for my research, I will be integrating indigenous sustainable fishery practices using modern aquaculture technology, determining optimal growing conditions for native rhodophyta, which is red algae, or I'll be referring to the term limu in this case. So when I first started off my research, I had two main objectives. My first objective was to determine nursery conditions that cultivate production of different limu species, which will expand in the literature of rigorous protocol for future generations to utilize. My second objective was to provide community-based local aquaculture learning opportunities. And this would incorporate talking to fish pond managers, mentorship, and also having outreach and education opportunities as well. So the first part of my story, we are at Malulani Ike Kai, which is probably a name that you guys have not heard of, but it's actually a place, and one of the traditional names given to what we now know as Kaneohe Bay. So we have Kaneohe Bay on our left, and on our right is Waikulua Loko Ia, which is found in the South Bay of Kaneohe. And within Waikulua Loko Ia, we have a IMTA system, or Integrated Multi-Trophic Aquaculture System, under the direction of Dr. Kai Fox, who is also here today. And it is funded partly through Sea-cret and also with PATH, Uncle Herb. So if we look at the system that we have built here at Waikulua Loko Ia within the Pua Boot Camp, we have water that is being taken from the local ia or the fish pond that makes its way through the water pump and into the filter that then goes into the fish tank. And within this fish tank, we have fingerling fish or pua, which are juvenile fish. And our goal is to use the pool that's in this fish or in our aquaculture facility and be able to restore fish ponds by outplanting this pool out once they're ready to survive the real world of the fish pond. However, with all of those fish within that fish tank, a lot of effluent water or doo water is made. And we don't want that going directly back into the fish pond. So we have a limu tank where the dirty water will go into the limu tank that then filters out all of that dirty poop that came from the fish, and then it goes back into the local ia is the whole idea of our system that we have. So of course we have our superstars. We have Miss Vai Vai, which literally means rich. And in this case, we're talking about the rich nutrients that are being provided from the fish pond as well as from the fish and their doo-doo water. And then this is what it is. And of course, we have Miss Limu Gal, as well as amazing La, which La is the sun, and he helps limu grow as any plant needs. We need sun. However, when we started this research, we got our limu, our specific species we started with was Hulu Vaina, which is the top one we can see there. And it's pretty brown. And we were getting our limu from Uncle Wally at Sand Island at the DAR facility out there. However, we would put it into our facility, and within a couple of weeks, our limu would start to turn this orange color and become kind of frail. And we're like, what is going on? We talked to some other people, and they've also noticed similar things happening to their limu. So we knew something was missing. This is when I decided that I was going to take a step back and figure out what limu really needs, what these specific species of limu need. So rather than working at Waikulua Loko Ia directly and working with cultivating limu that can start to restore other local ia by providing that limu that we're growing, and also other restoration projects like the Waimanalo Limu Hui, which we outplant native limu into Waimanalo and other bays to reintroduce native species of limu. I decided I wanted to take a step further back into the limu lab under the direction of Dr. Celia Smith at UH Manoa. And she has a lanai space that I can really control the settings that we're giving the limu. So controlling how much sunlight we're giving the limu, how much nutrients they're getting, the salinity and temperature. And finding that connection or finding that link between the two, we'll be able to figure out which species of limu can actually grow in the conditions we're putting them into. So of course we have the nutrient, Miss Vai Vai, and also amazing La in this as well. And last, I want to talk about my second objective, but I can't talk about my second objective without talking about my journey as an aspiring limu gal myself. I started off as a little girl. I grew up, I was born and raised on Oahu within Ko'olapoko, and we were always at the beach. And that just really inspired me. I love the ocean. It's just my people. It's what I am. And in 2015, I had the opportunity to be part of REMS, which is the Research Experience in Marine Science. And that's under the direction of Dr. Malia Rivera out at HIMB, or the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology on Moku'ola'e, or Coconut Island. And this program, the REMS program, is a summer opportunity that gives students who are historically marginalized the opportunity to do research in the STEM field, which in this case is marine science. It was such an impactful experience that I would return every summer as a peer mentor before graduating as valedictorian at Milani High School in 2017. I then went on to, and I moved to the continent, to California State University, Monterey Bay, where I pursued my bachelor's degree in marine science with a minor in environmental studies. However, every summer I would return home back to REMS and served as an undergraduate intern, which I really started to see the impact of the students we have on the students, as well as within myself because of this program. So the summer of 2019, we shifted gears within the REMS program, and I became a student again within the REMS Excel program. And I was able to do research at Paipaiho'eia, and I studied stable isotopes and the nutrients within the fish pond chain. And although I learned that I'm not built to be in the fish pond from 8 a.m. to 11 p.m., I did not like that at all. I found that missing piece that I missed every time I went back to the continent, which was serving my community and doing research that helps the culture and the community that I grew up in. So I was at CSU Monterey Bay. I graduated as a Dean's Medalist in 2021 in the midst of the pandemic online, and I wasn't too sure what I was going to do. I ended up becoming a substitute teacher when Dr. Malia Rivera from the REMS program, because it's just the mentor she is, she called me up and she was like, Seaenna, what are you up to? Like, what's your next plan? And I was like, you know, Malia, I don't really know. Graduate school wasn't in the picture for me. I didn't know what to do. I don't know how to apply. And she was like, well, why don't you come back and be an intern again and we'll help you. And I said, as long as you're going to help me through the process, I'll do it. And that's just who Malia is. And that's what she's been doing for me. So she connected me with Dr. Kai Fox out at Waikolo'ia with the Pua Boot Camp, where they had the Limu project aside with the Pua Boot Camp happening. And I was like, okay, cool, like this is fun, I'll do it. And this past summer, I had an amazing opportunity to mentor 2 students, Jen and Casey, who were my first Limu Gals. And this book was kind of inspired by them, the Limu Gals. So shout out to them, I think they're online. And within their project, we looked at Hula Vaina and utilized nutrients of organic fertilizers as well as CO2 to produce nutrients for the limu to grow in the absence of the fish poop that was providing the nutrients. They also had a community component. So if you want to scan that QR code, if my big head isn't blocking it, sorry. That code has some resources to teach you how to press limu, as well as some recipes that you could find in the Limu Eatery book, and how to grow limu in a bucket, as well as their posters from this past summer. And that really led me to where I'm at today and my second objective, which is to provide community-based local aquaculture learning opportunities. And with that, I want to thank you all for being here. Shout out to my family for all being here. They flew all the way from Maryland for me. I'm just joking. But yeah, thank you all so much, and thank you to everyone else for being here as well.
Questions for Seaenna?
Hi.
What's happening this Saturday?
Is that this Saturday already?
And repeat it for the online audience.
So November 12th, but the question was what's happening this Saturday. November 12th, we will be out at Waikolo'ia, which is in Kaneohe. Come see me for more details later. And our community outreach event with Sea-cret and celebrating limu, because why not? It's the year of the limu. From 9 to 12. Yeah, so we'll be doing lei making, different arts that are inspired by limu, and limu lei making, I should say, which will outplant into Kaneohe Bay as well. Yeah.
Hey, another round of applause. Please welcome our last graduate student speaker for the night. Let's bring Brandon Dees up to the microphone.
All right, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. And this is my project. It's on the Haiku Aquifer in Maui, and it's called What in the Well. Let's get started. And so some quick background on groundwater to help people understand this whole project. So when rain falls to the ground, you get 4 things that happen. You get evapotranspiration, which it kind of just hits the ground and evaporates. And then you have canopy interception, which when rain falls, it hits any bushes or trees or any vegetation, and then it dissolves off or evaporates off. And then it can also flow into any stream or body of water. And finally, it can seep into the ground and enter an aquifer. And that would be called infiltration. So water that seeps down to the ground, that can flow into aquifers and create groundwater recharge and have more water available to be able to pump out and withdraw from wells. And that. Now, quick thing on aquifers, there's 2 types. They're perched and basal. Perch are the ones that are up at, or they're not very deep. They're usually pretty shallow. And you can find them even above your house. Here's a nice little graphic. You can see a perched water body. I don't know if there's a laser pointer. Yeah, there is. Cool. Right here, this guy right here, that's a perched aquifer. So you can see up above. And then down here, this is what's called the freshwater lens. It can also be a basal aquifer. So it's this whole thing is just all fresh water. And that's the perched ones are much smaller, as you can see, but water can be drawn from both. And then up here, so I actually just came back from field work in Maui a couple of days ago. And this is a spring that someone was using and they're pumping water out of it. So it's a nice little cave in there, which is really cool to see. And so this is my study area right here in Haiku. And this is just a nice outline of the boundary that we have of the aquifer. Just a nice little graphic. And so the purpose of this study is water demand is continuously increasing. It's never going to end as population just keeps increasing. And especially on an island or islands, it is extremely important. And being able to understand our relationship with water and just manage it effectively and just know our limits, because it is a finite resource. We can't just keep pulling from it. And so in my study area, many members of the Haiku Community Association, they're very concerned about it because overall more people keep wanting to add more wells as population increases, there's more demand for food, for crops. So more water needs to be pulled out from the ground. So by pulling that water from the ground, you're having less available over time. And also when you are, just overall people are concerned about the security of their own water. And county water isn't a viable option for many people because the list is endless. It doesn't end. And when you finally get put on, when you're on that list, it's just the chances of being able to actually gain access to county water, it'll take more than a few years. And overall, there have been many water issues that people have experienced. And here, for one example, one person I interviewed, they had their well go dry and they supplied it to a whole homeowners association. So many families depended on that water and their well went dry. So they had to add an extra 20 feet of piping, which is very expensive. So it's not very sustainable to be able to keep digging down and adding more piping. And then you're continuously just the water level is dropping. So you need to have some sort of limit or knowing your limits. Understanding how water moves through this area in the system, how we interact with the groundwater is vital to protecting it. And what happens when you withdraw from a well, so you can see in this graphic right here, where it pulls it down into what's called a cone of depression. And you can think of a little whirlpool as you pull water from this ground. And here's the water line, and overall, over time, it'll start decreasing down. And say, for example, you have another person's well right here, and maybe stops right here. Eventually, it's going to hit a point where you're going to keep pumping water, but they're going to not be able to pump anything. So their well is going to go dry. So then they're going to have to add more extensions, as I talked about earlier, and it just can be very costly. And many community members also utilize rain catchment as the resource here, or the source. And using that rain catchment, it's only limited. There's only so much rain you can catch, quite literally. And so when they run out of water, they utilize their neighbors' wells or springs because that's their source of water. The community just works together to help each other. And so that can, with more people using these sources, can place more stress on that resource. So water is just more than a commodity. It's vital to how we live. We can't live without it. The methods I've been using for this so far are I've been taking samples of wells, springs, and streams. And I've been doing a monthly trip to Haiku and Maui. And as you can see here, this is my coworker Brian up here. Got the nice YSI, which is the little handy machine we use for measuring pH, salinity, dissolved oxygen, all that good stuff. And what I've been doing for some field work, I'm currently covered in a bunch of scratches. Look like I was attacked by a cat. And yeah, I'm doing some bushwhacking, exploring some streams and springs, and just looking around, trying to find sources where these guys are. You'll kind of be looking all around the stream. You'll finally find like a rock. You'll see a little trickle of water coming out. And you're like, is that it? Finally go up and eventually, like, that is a spring. And yeah, so as I said, this is the YSI, that little handy thing's doing, telling us this kind of stuff. And then I'm also taking a couple other samples to look at some major ions and also some water isotopes. And so using those water isotopes, what I will be doing is you can look at the connectivity of the aquifer. So you can look at two different wells or springs or whatever those, one of these three. There we go. One of these three. And you can look at the isotopes and you can look if they're related. If they show similar concentrations, that means they're likely coming from the same source. So one way you can look at that is you can map the flow path in a way. You have one, so groundwater tends to flow downward following the slope of elevation or just the topography going down. And going down, so if you find a well up here and a well down here having similar concentrations, then that means they're likely coming from the same path or source. So it's flowing down to that well. You can take little points and you can map that. And overall, I'd like to develop some groundwater models in the future, but right now I'm in the sample gathering stage. And just understanding the connection between these wells, streams, springs, just our relationship with how it recharges and withdrawal is very important to this. And creating a precipitation model to look into how it will vary in the future and how it's going to change based on just how rain changes overall, and being able to prepare for that and knowing what a sustainable yield is for this aquifer is vital to the future generations that will inherit it. And I'm gonna have to say it again, as you all know, water is a finite resource and it has to be taken care of. And future generations, they're depending on us. And mahalo to everyone that came out tonight. And one more thing is, if anyone knows anybody that has access to a wellspring or stream in this area, please come find me after.
Mahalo, Brandon, for your talk. Any questions for Brandon, either from the online audience or the in-room audience? We have a question from Keelan.
Yeah, I was just curious about who are these models intended for?
Mhm.
Is this to provide information to like the community association, or is this more sort of like targeted EMI to boost their, you know?
Yeah, it's a great question.
The question.
Yes. Yeah, so he asked, who is this information going to and who will it be used for? So this is currently for my master's thesis, and this information, I'm actually working alongside the Haiku Community Association. And so I meet with them weekly and we talk about stuff that we're doing, and they join me on the field work and making connections. And yeah, they've been a great resource in just helping me and forward this project.
Okay, any other questions for Brandon? Let's have a big round of applause for Brandon. Big round of applause for all 4 of our graduate students. Will it clip? Yep. Thank you. Please come next week. We have 4 more talks from Hawaii Sea Grant graduate, fellows, and PICAST graduate scholars next week. Doors open at 6, talks start at 6:30. So you can join us on the 14th of November and the 21st. And the last thing we're gonna do tonight is we are going to raffle a copy of the Lingual Eater. So if you got here early, pull out your raffle tickets. And I think what I learned is we read the last 3 numbers, right, Katie? Not all the numbers. Next one up, next one up, next one up. Okay, Seaenna, you pick. Oh. Hey, drum roll. Oh, drum roll, please. The winner of tonight's copy of the Limu Eater is 511.
Yeah!
Come see us afterwards for your copy of the Limu Eater. Beth, any other announcements?
Come next week, enjoy the exhibit as you're heading out, maybe for like 10, 15 minutes more, then we all have.
Mahalo for
Thank
coming.
you, Maya.
Thank you for coming. We'll see you next week.
Take pictures of my family. Yes, please do. Now we're gonna stop recording.